feel like the endless inspiration the internet offers us eventually becomes an endless distraction? Have we mistaken proximity to creativity for creativity itself? With our access to infinite tutorials, infinite references, and all the things we apparently must learn in order to be considered a good artist, has our cycle of watching people create slowly begun to replace creativity itself? I think about this constantly now. The internet feels like such an overstimulated place nowadays. A comic I saw recently by, I think the creator's name is pronounced Ilius, visualized this feeling perfectly. Talked about how everything feels more saturated now. How we have access to absolutely everything we could ever have wanted at every second of the day, to the point that there's no room left to think for ourselves anymore. Existing online somehow feels both like floating completely alone in the void, while simultaneously being blinded by so much noise that you can't properly take any of it in. That contradiction feels very modern to me. We are more connected than ever, seeing more people, more art, more ideas than any generation before us. Yet so many people feel creatively paralyzed and emotionally numb. I don't think we were made to see all the stars at once, is the final line from the comic that I just mentioned. And I think pretty much sums up everything I'm about to discuss. Humans really were never meant to witness the entirety of human creativity simultaneously. The internet has transformed art from something local and lived into an infinite stream of comparison and consumption. And because of that, I think a lot of artists now exist in this strange state of being constantly inspired while also being completely unable to create. There's so much beauty online, so many incredible artists, tutorials, ideas, aesthetics, trends, videos, and resources. But instead of that abundance making us feel fulfilled, I think it often leaves us overwhelmed and disconnected. And I don't even think inspiration itself is the problem. I think humans need distance from things in order to truly connect with them. We need time to sit with things. We need slowness. We need silence and boredom, and moments where our brains aren't constantly being fed information every second. Discovery used to feel sacred. You would find an artist through a friend, or stumble across a book at a library, or see a painting somewhere and carry that feeling around with you for weeks. You would obsess over one thing for months because you only had access to that one thing. It became a part of you. Now everything exists at the same time. You can see thousands of artists before breakfast. Every masterpiece ever made is a search away. Every process video, every speed paint, every tutorial, every how to improve fast, every mistakes beginner artists make, every aesthetic imaginable is constantly refreshed in front of us before we even have time to absorb any of it emotionally. I think eventually inspiration stops feeling inspiring when it's endless. It just becomes noise. It becomes another thing to consume and move on from 5 seconds later. And I think this especially affects artists because art is already something deeply tied to vulnerability and identity. Creating art requires slowness. It requires making bad work. It requires being alone with your thoughts long enough to actually hear them. But the internet trains us against that. It trains us to constantly seek stimulation, constantly compare ourselves, constantly optimize ourselves into becoming better artists instead of actually letting ourselves exist as artists. I think a lot of people, myself included, fall into this cycle where consuming art starts to feel like productivity. Watching tutorials feels productive. Saving references feels productive. Organizing Pinterest boards feels productive. Watching videos about creativity feels productive. But at some point, you realize you spent 6 hours learning art without actually drawing anything. We are replacing lived artistic experience with simulated artistic experience. And the scary part is it feels enough in the moment. Watching somebody else create gives us a small version of the satisfaction of creating something ourselves. It tricks our brain a little. We feel closer to creativity, so we assume we are participating in it. But proximity to creativity is not creativity itself. Watching somebody else paint is not the same as wrestling with your own canvas. Watching anatomy tutorials is not the same as struggling through pages of awkward figure drawings. Consuming art cannot replace the physical act of making it. I also think the internet has changed how artists develop identities in the first place. Before the internet, artists were shaped much more by locality. Their communities, their friends, the music around them, the weather they grew up in, the stories they heard as children, local galleries, local trends, local limitations. Even limitations themselves shape style. If you only have access to certain materials, certain books, certain artists, your works naturally become more personal because it grows from your own environment. However, nowadays, artists are shaped by algorithms. Everyone sees the same trending tutorials. Everyone uses the same brushes. Everyone learns from the same creators. Everyone is encouraged towards the same correct methods of growth. We compare ourselves instantly to the best artists in the world before we even allow ourselves to become beginners. And because we are exposed to so much art constantly, I think many artists struggle to understand what their voice even sounds like underneath all the noise. Sometimes I wonder how many aesthetics online are actually personal expression, and how many are simply the result of mass algorithmic influence. Not even intentionally, either. I don't think artists are copying each other maliciously. I just think when everyone is looking at the same stars, eventually everyone starts drawing the same constellations. And I don't want this to sound like I completely hate the internet, because I don't. The internet has generally changed lives for artists. People can find communities now no matter where they live. Isolated artists can meet people who understand them. People can learn art for free. Small artists can share work without needing gallery connections. I probably even wouldn't be making this video without the internet, or even have had this idea without it. But I think that's what makes this feeling so complicated. The same thing connecting artists is also exhausting them. I miss the way the internet used to feel sometimes. I miss when websites felt smaller and more personal, when Instagram was chronological instead of algorithmic, when finding an artist felt accidental instead of strategically pushed into your face, when short-form content wasn't competing for every second of your attention span. There used to be more space online somehow. Like there was more room to sit with things instead of immediately consuming the next piece of media thing. I think you know what I mean. Because with the way the internet exists now, we are seeing more art, more lives, and more ideas in one day than I honestly think humans were psychologically built to process. And through this, we are seeing so much more while somehow experiencing less. We know everything and touch nothing. We look at forests through screens instead of walking through them. We watch videos about creativity instead of creating. We collect inspiration endlessly without giving ourselves the time to transform it into something personal. And maybe that's why so many artists feel burnt out now. Not because they lack inspiration, but because they are drowning in it. Referencing back to the comic again, I keep thinking about the idea that we really were only meant to see a few stars. A few guiding lights, enough to inspire us, enough to help us navigate, but not the entire cosmos crashing down on us at once. Because when you see everything simultaneously, nothing feels special anymore. Wonder turns into overstimulation. So, would it really be so bad if we distance ourselves from the internet a little? Not entirely. I don't mean abandoning technology and disappearing into the woods forever. I mean existing online more intentionally. Still messaging friends, still sharing art, still learning and connecting and discovering things, but not endlessly scrolling to the point where we lose the ability to hear our own thoughts. Maybe we were only ever meant to see enough stars to help us find our own way. Not every possible path at once. Not every artist, every masterpiece, every tutorial, every life all competing for our attention at the same time. Just enough inspiration to guide us towards the things we genuinely love. Maybe part of being an artist is learning when to stop looking at everyone else's sky and finally spend time under your own.